For the last 3 days before leaving this world, I decided to get along well with Swaine Patel and be the perfect wife he wanted. I no longer felt jealous of his first love, no longer made a big fuss about him not coming home all night. On the first day, he snorted coldly. "You've finally come to your senses. If you had been like this earlier, everyone would have been happy." On the second day, he looked at me with a complex gaze, his voice filled with confusion. "Ethel, why aren't you angry?" I smiled faintly. "Isn't this what you've been expecting?" Ding! This novel reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. By the time I reconnected with the system, Swaine Patel had been giving me the cold shoulder for a week. "Host, you've finally decided to leave, huh?" The system's voice was filled with schadenfreude. I didn't blame it. When I successfully won over Swaine years ago and decided to stay here, the system had tried to persuade me earnestly. Based on the system's years of work experience, those who stay never end up well. But at that time, I was overly confident in the indestructible love between Swaine and me, and firmly rejected it. Now, I smiled bitterly. How much time do I have left? As soon as 3 days. I nodded, deciding to cherish these 3 days and get along well with Swaine. After the system left, I took the initiative to call Swaine on my phone. This was our first contact in a while. However, the call was disconnected several times in a row. I mechanically redialed repeatedly. Finally, Swaine's voice came through, annoyed and irritated. "Ethel Shaw, when will you stop?" I was slightly stunned, my already disappointed heart still stung. I deliberately ignored the emotions in his tone and asked gently, "Swaine, are you coming home for dinner tonight? I made your favorite Coca-Cola chicken wings." There was silence on the other end for a moment, then a light sigh. "I'll come back if you want, but Ethel Shaw, please lower your proud head and apologize to Danny first." A week ago, Swaine had helped celebrate his first love, Danny's birthday. Danny posted a photo on social media. "With you, I'll never envy anyone else." In the photo, Danny's face was smeared with cream, her hands clasped together making a wish. She was surrounded by luxury gift boxes, with Swaine standing behind her. In the warm candlelight, she smiled innocently and naively. Below, mutual friends were exclaiming how perfect they were together. Danny replied with a shy smiley face. I also liked the post and commented, "I envy you for having my husband with you." A few minutes later, that post was deleted. Swaine's call came immediately after. He berated me angrily. "Ethel Shaw, are you sane? It's Danny's birthday today. Are you deliberately trying to ruin her day?" Danny sobbed quietly. "Swaine, don't blame Ethel. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have bragged about you being with me on my birthday." Swaine's tone softened as he comforted her. "It has nothing to do with you. She's just picking a fight with me and taking it out on you." His tone then turned cold. "But she's overestimating herself. Nothing is more important than your birthday." Every word was like a knife to my heart. I clenched my fists in anger and sneered. "That's right, the birthday of your first love is certainly more important than your wedding anniversary with your wife." Swaine's breath caught. He lowered his voice and asked, "Today is our wedding anniversary?" But before I could answer, Danny's crying came through the receiver again. "Ethel, it's all my fault. I'll come apologize to you in person right away." Swaine's little guilt seemed to disappear instantly. He comforted Danny softly, then continued to scold me. "It's just a wedding anniversary, we can celebrate it any year. This is Danny's first birthday since returning to the country. Ethel Shaw, can't you be more generous?" I told him clearly, word by word, that I couldn't. Then I hung up the phone. Intense love and stable emotions can never coexist, but Swaine didn't understand. On the ice cream cake, the kissing couple slowly melted, staining the happy 7th wedding anniversary text. I picked up the cake and threw it in the trash. My phone had a new message notification. I opened it to find another taunt from Danny's social media alt account. "Ethel Shaw, I told you long ago, when it comes down to choosing between us, Swaine will always choose me. Do you believe it now?" A few hours ago, I didn't believe it. But now, it had become a fact. Swaine didn't come home all night. When I woke up again, he was eating breakfast in the dining room. Seeing me, he gave me a cold look and said, "Come with me to the company later to apologize to Danny. Because of your comment, she felt so guilty and upset that she couldn't sleep all night." I sneered, "I won't go. I've never heard of a legitimate wife apologizing to a mistress in this world." "Ethel, how can you speak so rudely?" He slammed the table hard. "Danny is just my secretary. Her family is now broken. Don't you have any sympathy?" I curled my lips, looking at him mockingly. "A secretary you sleep with?" Swaine's face changed dramatically as he flipped the table. Tableware scattered across the tiles with a clatter. I closed my eyes and turned my head away, not wanting to look. Disappointment piled up in my heart. How did Swaine become like this? He growled in anger, "Since you're so stubborn, let's separate for a while." He slammed the door as he left. He didn't come back for a week. I was so upset that I couldn't sleep for nights on end. But during this time, Danny's alt account never stopped updating. Brought to Bali by the boss for a business trip, so happy. Wah, I accidentally fell on the beach and scraped my knee on a small stone. The boss scolded me for 10 minutes out of concern, but I've already punished him by making him buy me a small cake. Bonus, muscle photo, secretly taken. Wonder if the boss will punish me if he finds out. I didn't argue or make a fuss anymore, just silently saved these screenshots. People who have already gone bad should be thrown away in time. This morning, Danny's update informed me that they had returned from Bali. Swaine's voice continued from the receiver. "Ethel, did you hear what I said?" My thoughts returned to the present, and I replied flatly, "Okay." The noisy background on the other end suddenly went quiet. A few seconds later, Swaine asked again, "What did you say?" I forced a smile to my lips. I said, "I agree to go apologize to Danny. For the last 3 days, I will fulfill all your requests. Then, I will leave you forever." I arrived at the location Swaine had sent me. The lively private room was bustling with noise. As soon as I appeared at the door, someone whistled, "Ethel's here." The teasing voice was full of anticipation. Since Danny's return, Swaine and I had been having small arguments every 3 days. And big ones every 5 days, and all our friends in the circle knew about it. I looked around and found Swaine sitting in the middle of the sofa. Our eyes met, his expression unreadable. Danny sat next to him, cuddling up like a little bird. "Ethel, we heard you're here to apologize to Danny. Someone stirred up trouble." Swaine's friends were the best at reading the room. Before, when Swaine loved me, they'd always respect me and never dared to joke about me. Now that Danny was back, anyone with eyes could see Danny's position in Swaine's heart. They also showed me a lot more disrespect. I stepped forward, my gaze sweeping over the wine glasses filled on the table, and gently picked one up. "To show my sincerity, I'll down this glass of wine to apologize to Danny, okay?" Swaine tilted his head, watching leisurely without a word. The people around had excited looks in their eyes, all seeming to enjoy the show. "Ethel, what are you doing?" Danny suddenly stood up, like a startled rabbit, frantically trying to grab the wine glass from my hand. Ethel only scolded me a bit, which I deserve. "How can I accept Ethel's apology?" she said, her eyes turning red. A flash of distress passed through Swaine's eyes as he stood up and pulled her back to sit down. "How can you not accept it? No one can bully you when I'm here." Danny's eyes sparkled with gratitude as she looked at Swaine, then back at me a few seconds later. "Then just drink this small glass, and once you finish, all our misunderstandings will be cleared up." She smiled and handed me the wine glass. "Ethel, Swaine is just being overprotective of me. Don't be angry, okay?" I looked at Swaine, smiled lightly, and calmly accepted the wine glass. "Of course not." I raised the glass. "Let everyone here be witness, I was previously jealous and misunderstood the relationship between Swaine and Danny, which upset Danny. This glass of wine is my self-punishment, to apologize to Danny." After speaking, I looked around at everyone present. They all froze for a moment. Someone whispered, "Is this really the Ethel Shaw who never bowed her head before?" Swaine in the center was also stunned for a moment, ignoring the flash of astonishment in his eyes. I raised my hand and drank the entire glass of wine. I'm allergic to alcohol, others might not know, but Swaine does. After finishing the glass, my body already felt like a piece of driftwood floating on a river. Someone supported me. Ethel, don't drink anymore. His face was blurry, and I struggled to recognize that it was Travis, Swaine's friend. He seemed to be the only one in the room who hadn't stirred up trouble earlier. Thank you, I whispered to him. Then, as I was about to look up and ask Swaine if this apology was enough, I saw Danny quickly give a look to the others. Immediately after, someone loudly stirred things up. Ethel has a good alcohol tolerance, but to show sincerity in apologizing, one glass isn't enough, right? He pushed a whole bottle of red wine towards me with ill intentions. Then he turned to look at Swaine. Swaine, don't you agree? Swaine's brows had long since furrowed. He silently watched the wine bottle approaching me, just about to speak. Danny's choked voice rang out. Don't say that, it's already my honor that Ethel would lower herself to apologize to someone like me who's lost everything. As long as Ethel doesn't rush to the office to humiliate me anymore, and doesn't disrupt the company's work, I'm fine with anything. Swaine raised his eyebrows, looking at her in disbelief. She rushed to the office to humiliate you? When did this happen? His voice raised, and the entire private room fell silent. Danny stammered, It was my first day as your secretary. Anger flared in Swaine's eyes as he looked up at me. I admitted frankly, that's right, I did go there that day. Before this, I had argued countless times with Swaine because of Danny. In the middle of the night, Danny would have a fever and want him to accompany her to the hospital. Danny would get lost and need him to pick her up. Danny would buy clothes and send pictures asking which one looked best. We argued and fought bitterly. Swaine, can't you care a bit more about my feelings? I love you, I can't help but mind when you're so close to another woman. It hurts me too. You know very well that you're the most important person in the world to me. He tenderly wiped away my tears, promising to keep his distance from Danny in the future. But just a few days later, I received a message from Danny. Ethel, what's the use of you trying to stop this? All I have to do is shed a few tears, and Swaine agrees to make me his secretary anyway. I thought she was fabricating lies to drive a wedge between us. I believed Swaine wouldn't lie to me. But still, with a hint of unease, I quietly went to Swaine's office. And there, I saw Danny sitting in the secretary's area. She lightly tossed her hair, looking at me smugly. Ethel, aren't my earrings pretty? Swaine gave them to me as a welcome gift. Her expression made me sick. I raised my hand and slapped her. Danny, always picking up other people's things, aren't you ashamed? At that time, she covered her face, but looked at me with a wild smile. Ethel, are you afraid because you feel you're about to lose Swaine? Now, Danny covered her unharmed cheek with teary eyes, sobbing. Ethel only slapped me once that day, it's okay. As long as Ethel can vent her anger without involving Swaine, it doesn't matter how much it hurts me. After hearing this, Swaine looked at me with a grim face. The anger in his eyes seemed ready to swallow me whole. Ethel Shaw, I thought you were just being difficult, just too possessive to accept Danny's return for a while. But I never imagined you'd become such a vicious and malicious woman. His cold voice held no trace of pity. I think drinking this bottle is getting off easy for you. I looked up at him in shock. Is this really what you think of me? Swaine snorted, actions speak louder than words. You know I can't drink. I stared at him steadily. Swaine scoffed, then what are you here for today? He glanced towards the doorway behind me, his face tense. If you're not here to apologize, then you can leave now. My heart felt as if it was being pierced by thousands of needles. A tear fell to the ground, disappearing instantly. I was surprised to find that before coming here, I had already prepared myself to leave this world behind. But it seemed a glimmer of hope still remained in my heart. Perhaps it was just a misunderstanding? Perhaps he still loved me. Unfortunately, that bottle of alcohol crushed the last spark of life. Swaine, I don't want you anymore. I smiled at him. If I drink this bottle, will you forgive me and come home with me? Danny also looked up at him. Swaine's calm eyes revealed no emotion as he spoke flatly. The person you need to apologize to is Danny, not me. Ethel, adults should take responsibility for their actions. I swallowed the bitterness in my throat and nodded woodenly, all right. But the next second, the bottle was snatched from my hand. Swaine, drinking a whole bottle could kill her. It was Travis. Swaine curled his lip, ignoring him and looking only at me. Ethel, the choice is yours. I'm not forcing you. My heart felt as if it had long since been scattered to the winds. At this moment, I surprisingly felt no pain at all. I'll drink it. I stubbornly took the bottle back from Travis, thanking him again in a low voice before putting my mouth to the bottle and gulping it down. In my hazy state, I seemed to see Swaine pushing through the crowd, striding towards me. The bottle was snatched from my hand as my body fell heavily. Swaine Patel, this wine is so bitter. In my dream, I seemed to return to 7 years ago. I had just arrived in this world. At that time, Swaine was repressed and vicious. He was an illegitimate child, only brought back to the Patel family after his mother's death. The system reminded me of the plot. When Swaine first returned to the Patel family as a child, he wasn't liked by the second-generation heirs and was often bullied. Once, when a group of young heirs were spraying water at him with water guns again, Dani, dressed in a white princess dress, stood up for him. She became an unforgettable beauty in Swaine's memory. But what he didn't know was that it was just Dani's deliberate display of bravery and kindness to please the male lead who was not far away. Swaine was merely a tool in this scenario. When I arrived, Swaine had gradually begun to show his potential in the Patel family. However, his temperament was violent and his business methods were cold-blooded and cruel. So he wasn't valued by the Patel family patriarch. I appeared by his side as the recently returned daughter of a family friend, arranged to meet him for marriage. At first, Swaine had no good feelings towards me. For a whole month, I made no progress in my strategy. Until one day, I attended a landmark building negotiation on behalf of my father, and Swaine was also there. At the dinner table, an important figure deliberately made things difficult for me, asking me to toast each person at the table. After one drink, my body started to itch, and red rashes gradually appeared. As I was about to take the second drink, someone grabbed my wrist. It was Swaine. He took the glass from my hand and smiled faintly at everyone. The Patel and Shaw families are old friends. I'll drink the remaining glasses on behalf of Miss Shaw. Amidst the clinking of glasses, he subtly diverted the topic away from me while tilting his head to quietly remind me. I suggest you leave quietly now and take some medicine. I'll cover for you. I was slightly stunned and looked up, but he had already joined the conversation with the others, his eyes shining. Confident, composed, and graceful. At that moment, I clearly felt that I had fallen for him. I started to deliberately appear around him frequently, slowly melting his hard exterior with thoughtfulness and gentleness, and improving his relationship with the Patel family patriarch. I also used the Shaw family's connections to help him sign one deal after another, increasing his influence in the Patel Corporation. Our joint efforts left footprints all over the world. During that negotiation in Southeast Asia, we encountered local forces in a firefight. We were trapped for 3 days and 3 nights. Just as we were about to leave that rainforest, we encountered bandits. I shielded him, and a bullet hit my left chest. At the critical moment, our prearranged external support finally arrived and rescued us from a group of desperate criminals. In the car that was transferring me to the hospital, Swaine's eyes turned red for the first time, and large drops of tears fell on me. His whole body trembling, he asked me why I was so foolish and begged me to hold on. He said, "We haven't had our wedding yet, you haven't become my wife, you can't die." At that time, I really thought I was going to die in this land. I raised my hand to stroke Swaine's face, forcing a smile. "Don't cry, Swaine. I came to this world for you in the first place." At the same time, the system reminded me, "Host, the strategy progress has reached 100%. Congratulations, your strategy is successful." Fortunately, the bullet didn't hit a fatal spot, and I survived. After 3 months of recovery, Swaine married me in a grand wedding that shocked the world. In countless nights of passionate lovemaking after marriage, he whispered his love for me over and over again in my ear. By then, Dani had long married the male lead abroad. I also thought that there would be no more complications in my world with Swaine. In my days, I felt someone helping me change my clothes. I stubbornly pushed him away. Don't touch me, I have a husband, my husband is Swaine Patel. The person's hand paused on my clothes. His fingertips just stopping at the position of the gunshot scar. The once wound had long healed and grown new flesh. But it forever captured that moment on my body. The person seemed to freeze for a long time. He coaxed gently, "Be good, don't fuss. Let's change your clothes and take a bath first." He rambled on about many things, but I couldn't hear clearly. I covered his mouth. So noisy. After saying that, I suddenly felt a surge of sadness and started crying. The person asked, "Why are you crying?" With that question, it was like pulling a loose thread on a sweater. I cried even harder. My husband has fallen for someone else. He bullied me. I don't want him anymore. I'm leaving. The person seemed to be stunned. Later, I don't know what happened, but I fell into a deep sleep. When I woke up again, it was already bright outside. Sunlight filtered through the gauze curtains. Light and shadows intertwined in the bedroom. The system's voice sounded, "Host, you're leaving tomorrow. Do you have any regrets?" It reminded me, Swaine Patel is just outside. As soon as the system's voice faded, Swaine appeared at the door with a glass of honey water. His voice was slightly hoarse, and his expression was a bit unnatural as he looked at me. "Ethel, you're awake." I didn't take the cup, instead drinking the honey water directly from Swaine's hand. This kind of intimacy was something we hadn't shared in a long time. After Danny came back, I found Swaine dirty and didn't allow him to touch me anymore. Swaine's dark eyes widened in surprise, a delighted smile appearing at the corners of his mouth. "You clearly know you can't drink wine, yet you still try to act tough." His voice fell with a hint of reproach. But he probably immediately realized that he was the instigator of this incident. He quickly fell silent, a flash of guilt passing through his eyes. It seemed like he was waiting for my sarcastic counterattack. This was the most familiar state of interaction between us lately. But I only had an apologetic smile on my face. "You're right, I won't do this again in the future." Swaine looked up at me in astonishment. He wanted to say something, but his mouth opened and closed without a word coming out. I took the initiative to speak. "Swaine, can you accompany me to see Grandpa today?" He immediately nodded. "Of course, Grandpa has been mentioning for a while that he misses you." We went to the supermarket together, holding hands as we arrived at the health supplements section. I carefully selected one health product after another, occasionally asking for his opinion. After asking several times, he held his forehead and smiled wryly. "Mrs. Patel, are you planning to move the entire supermarket home?" I looked over sheepishly, only then realizing that the health products I had chosen had already piled up into a small mountain. Swaine continued to tease. "Looks like we brought the wrong car today. We should have brought a truck instead of the Bentley to transport Mrs. Patel's spoils of war." My face slightly reddened as I laughed and playfully punched him. His casual smile fell on every part of me. I said softly, "It's better to buy more, so Grandpa won't run out in the future." "We can always come back to buy more later," he casually replied. I smiled without answering, just lowered my head and continued selecting. But somehow, I felt two gazes lingering and probing behind my back. I didn't want to think too much about it and ignored it. After finishing our selection, I asked Swaine to call the housekeeper to come and pick up the health products I had chosen. We only carried the two best items in our hands. When we reached the underground parking lot of the supermarket, I exclaimed, "Oh no, I forgot." Seeing my urgency, Swaine quickly asked what was wrong. I immediately opened the car door and got out. "I forgot to buy knee pads and back supports. Grandpa's knees and back aren't good." Swaine chased after me from the driver's seat, wrapping his arm around my waist, smiling helplessly. "Mrs. Patel, it's still so hot out, who needs knee pads and back supports now?" I shook my head. "They'll be needed when the weather gets cold." After saying this, I continued walking towards the supermarket entrance, ignoring his attempts to stop me. Swaine took a big step to catch up, grabbing my wrist. "Ethel, what are you rushing for?" He was smiling calmly and gently, but I could sense the unease deep in his eyes. We can come by knee pads and back supports together in winter, okay? After saying this, he forcefully pulled me back to the car, ignoring my reaction. Swaine. I sighed inwardly. Forget it. I'm leaving tomorrow. I don't want to argue with him. The car re-entered the main road, and Swaine remained silent throughout. There was an awkward atmosphere in the quiet. I fidgeted, touching this and that for no reason. Suddenly, when I touched the car charm, Swaine's hand on the steering wheel became unsteady, causing the car to shake slightly. He glanced quickly at my hand lingering on the car charm and explained. Last time when Danny was in my car, she was playing around and changed it to this rabbit. I'll switch it back to the original 8 auspicious symbols when we get home. I was slightly stunned, stroking the white, smooth fur of the rabbit charm, and said slowly. Don't change it, this rabbit is quite cute. The yellow light ahead turned red. Swaine stopped the car and tilted his head to look at me, his eyes seemingly full of confusion. What's wrong? I asked. He frowned slightly. Aren't you angry? Before, you would always get upset when Danny's things appeared around me. I chuckled lightly, realizing it was because of this. If I didn't care anymore, how could I be angry? I was wrong before, I said, looking calmly at the license plate of the car in front. Danny and you have a childhood sweetheart bond, and now she's divorced and back in the country, with her family in ruins. I should have more sympathy and concern for her. Being jealous like that before was inappropriate. I sighed softly. Swaine's frown deepened. But that 8 auspicious symbols charm was something you personally knelt and prayed for. You don't mind about that either? The red light ahead turned green. I didn't respond but reminded him, it's green. Swaine silently looked at me for 2 seconds before starting the car again. I tilted my head and silently looked out at the traffic flow. Did I mind? I asked myself. My mind hazily returned to the day I went to the temple. At that time, Swaine had already taken full control of the Patel Corporation. But there were many in the board of directors who were dissatisfied with him, and his aggressive business tactics made enemies on all sides. Every so often, there would be an assassination attempt. I was worried sick every day, fearing he might get hurt. After waking up from another nightmare, I made a special trip to the temple, kneeling 3 times and kowtowing 9 times. I sincerely prayed in my heart for the deities to bless Swaine with safety every day. The 8 auspicious symbols car charm was also consecrated at that time. The 8 auspicious symbols include the parasol, golden fish, vase, lotus, white conch shell, endless knot, victory banner, and dharma wheel. They symbolize perfect fortune and wisdom, turning misfortune into good fortune. I climbed all 1,080 steps, wearing out my knees and forehead. When I returned with the Buddhist items, Swaine found out. He tenderly applied ice to my wounds and gently kissed my forehead. He cherished the 8 auspicious symbols charm, saying that as long as the charm existed, he would be safe. Now, the whereabouts of the 8 auspicious symbols charm were unknown, and I wouldn't ask about it anymore. What I truly loved was the once sincere and passionate Swaine. Not this detached and indecisive jerk who now allows Danny to provoke and bully me. Ethel. He called my name, but a phone ring interrupted. We both looked at the screen. It was Danny. I smiled and picked up the phone. It's not convenient for you to answer while driving. Let me answer for you. Before he could react, I directly accepted the video call. Swaine. Danny's delicate voice came through. Swaine swallowed uncomfortably, his gaze passing over me. What's wrong, Danny? Swaine, what should I do? I just boiled some water and accidentally scalded my calf. She whimpered softly, it hurts so much, wah wah wah. As she spoke, she changed the direction of the camera. In the video, Danny's calf was bright red. I couldn't help but chuckle softly. She really went to such lengths to get Swaine's attention. However, if it was really scalded by boiling water, it should be more than just red. Hearing my laugh, Danny's voice feigned panacine panic. Swaine, is Ethel there too? Did I interrupt your date again? She lowered her voice sadly. I'm sorry, Swaine. It's just that I really don't know who else I can ask for help. You know I don't have any family here anymore. Never mind, I won't be a bother anymore. In the video, Danny pressed her lips tightly together, looking utterly helpless. Don't panic. Swaine instinctively stepped on the gas pedal, overtaking the car next to him. But in the next moment, he seemed to remember something. He gently comforted Danny. I have something to do with Ethel right now and can't come over. I'll call Travis and ask him to go. My mouth gaped slightly as I looked at Swaine in surprise. The video call had already been hung up. Swaine blinked uncomfortably. Why are you looking at me like that? But before I could answer, a sneer had already escaped from my lips. So he did know how to refuse. So he could see through Danny's affected pretense. Then what about all our previous arguments and his repeated excuses? Seeing that I didn't answer, he went ahead and dialed Travis's number, asking him to go check on Danny. Travis angrily retorted, "Damn it, buddy, I can help with other things, but not this. I feel sick just looking at that two-faced woman. You always sympathize with her situation, but her misery isn't caused by your wife. Don't say I didn't warn you, bro. You've been blindly led by the nose by her. One day you'll end up hurting your wife irreparably." The system suddenly appeared. Host, this Travis is a master at spotting two-faced women. I was startled by its sudden voice and leaned forward abruptly. Swaine, who was on the phone, quickly reached out his arm to stop me from hitting the front of the car. I was slightly stunned and instinctively thanked him. His eyes were filled with emotion as he patted my head. "Ethel, we're husband and wife, don't be so formal." I tilted my head to avoid his touch. His hand froze in midair. I realized and reassured him, "You focus on driving first." Just as we were about to reach the Patel family's old house, Swaine's phone rang again. It was Danny again. Swaine's brow flashed with impatience as he answered, "What is it now?" Perhaps such a cold and harsh tone made Danny feel unfamiliar. She was silent for a few seconds before crying out, "Swaine, I'm dying of pain. Can you really bear to ignore me?" The old mansion was almost in sight. Swaine's expression became troubled. I smiled at him. "You should go see Danny first, she's injured and needs someone with her." His face darkened, looking at me sadly. "You need someone too." "Swaine!" Danny's suddenly raised voice was rather shrill. "Don't you remember? You promised me when we were young that you'd always be there whenever I needed you." Swaine's body stiffened, and he instinctively looked at me. I chuckled lightly, saying nonchalantly, "It's fine, grandfather's place isn't far. I'll just take a taxi there." Swaine wanted to say something more, but my attitude was gentle yet firm. He had agreed to go to Danny, but still insisted on dropping me off at the old mansion's entrance first. After I got out, he looked at me anxiously. "Ethel, go see grandfather first, I'll be back right away." I gazed at him softly, my eyes like water. The car's shadow gradually shrank and disappeared from my view. "Goodbye, Swaine Patel." My phone vibrated with a notification. I opened it to find a private message from Danny. "Ethel Shaw, you think you can keep Swaine with that old man? You've still lost." I calmly typed back, "Are you sure about that?" I had leaked today's itinerary with Swaine to Danny. Her phone call on the way was also within my expectations. Although this same scenario had played out countless times before, I didn't mind one more. After I leave this place, it will deepen Swaine's guilt and regret towards me. Judging from his reaction earlier, he's not without feelings for me now. Perhaps, if I had just said something today, he would have ignored Danny's act and stayed with me. Too bad, I don't want this belated awakening anymore. I find it disgusting. I'm also curious if she'll still be so confident after today. Lost in thought, grandfather had already come out of the old mansion with his cane. His graying hair shimmered in the sunlight. The old man who had given me the most care and love in this world. Finally awaiting our last farewell. No one could tell that this kind and gentle old man before them was once a powerful figure straddling both legal and illegal worlds. "Everyone take a good look, has our Ethel grown any white hair too?" Grandfather Patel joked to the butler beside him. I was completely baffled by his words. the butler explained with amusement. The master is saying the young madam is still so young, yet nagging like an old woman. I couldn't help but laugh. I was leaving this world for good tomorrow, so I couldn't help giving a few more reminders. Who knew this little old man would tease me again? Night gradually deepened. Before I left, Swaine still hadn't come. Grandfather Patel cursed a few times, immediately asking the butler to call and summon him for a scolding. The system reminded me, "Don't worry, host, I've set Swaine Patel's phone to be unreachable." Sure enough, the butler shook his head helplessly. Grandfather's temper flared even more. "Find someone to check what that jerk is up to right now." Seeing him angry, I hurried to pat his back and calm him down. He glanced at me, asking worriedly, "Child, how long has he been neglecting you like this?" I smiled bitterly, shaking my head. "It's not like that, grandfather. Swaine is just too busy today." "You're still defending him." Grandfather got even angrier. I knew that the more gracious I pretended to be now, the harsher the punishment Swaine, and even Danny, would face tomorrow. After all, everyone in the Patel family knew that old Mr. Patel favored me far more than Swaine. After sending grandfather back to his room, the system explained. "Host, Swaine Patel didn't intentionally not come, I made his car's tires blow out." It paused, 3 cars in a row. I declined grandfather's offer to arrange a car for me. "Swaine will be here soon, don't worry, grandfather." Then, I slowly walked out of the old mansion's villa area. According to my plan with the system, shortly after leaving the old mansion, I would be stopped and killed by a robber. The moment the snow-white knife pierced my abdomen, the system separated my consciousness from my body. Fresh red blood flowed down the knife, turning large patches of the asphalt road dark. Fortunately, I didn't feel any pain. The system manipulated my phone, dialing out my final call to Swaine before my death. He couldn't answer. Later, on many deep nights, he would repeatedly think about how he had abandoned me on the road for Danny, and how he had missed my last distress call, cutting off my chance to survive. Seeing that someone had died, the robber fled in panic. A few minutes later, my phone started vibrating. Husband calling. Husband calling. But no one would ever answer again. My entire body was twisted into a strange posture by the robber. Ribs and knees broken. To eliminate any possibility of survival, the robber stabbed me more than a dozen times. The system, unable to bear it, covered my eyes. "Sorry, I arranged it a bit harshly." I shook my head. "It's okay, how else would we make Swaine Patel suffer from midnight nightmares for life?" The phone was still vibrating persistently. I stared at it in a daze. The system said that on my last day in this world, I would exist as a soul. 2 hours later, Swaine found my body by tracking my phone's location. The scene before him left him completely frozen. Swaine reached out in disbelief, trembling as he checked for my breath. The empty sensation made his whole body shudder. He collapsed to the ground. The system cursed, "Ha, serves the scumbag right. What's the use of his regretful act now? Ethel. Ethel, wake up." Tears gushed from his eyes as he reached out to cover my bleeding wounds. But there were too many wounds, and the blood had long since drained. Even though my soul had already left my body, looking at those gaping knife wounds, I still felt waves of pain in my heart. Swaine stumbled towards the car, carrying my body. "Bring the car over," he shouted. The butler, sent by grandfather to search for me, immediately drove the car to Swaine's side. But upon seeing me in Swaine's arms, he gasped. How did the young madam get so severely injured? The system and I sat in the back of the car, watching Swaine floor the accelerator, running through more than a dozen red lights. The butler, terrified, kept urging him to slow down and be careful. All his pleas were angrily silenced by Swaine. On our way to the hospital, all the experts from the Patel private hospital were summoned back. He placed me on the hospital bed and warned everyone with bloodshot eyes. "This is my wife, the young madam of the Patel group. I don't care what methods you use, you must save her life." The team of experts, with an average age over 40, took turns examining my body, which had long since stopped beating. They shook their heads helplessly and solemnly advised Swaine. "Mr. Patel, it's better to find a good mortician to let the young madam go with dignity." What did you say? Swaine's veins bulged as he tightly gripped the expert's collar. His bloodthirsty gaze seemed as if it would swallow the expert whole. Countless people came to intervene and restrain him, but Swaine shouted like a madman. You haven't even tried to save her. How dare you declare her dead? If Ethel can't live, I'll make all of you accompany her in death. Forced by his authority, the team of experts had no choice but to send me back to the ICU, attempting futile efforts. The system covered its ears. Host, Swaine Patel is so crazy. I was amused by it, but then interrupted by a startled cry. It was grandfather, who had rushed over after hearing the news. His hunched body trembled uncontrollably, heavily striking his cane on the ground. Child, how could you let your grandfather bury you before himself? Tears welled up in my eyes. I apologized softly. I'm sorry, grandfather. I broke my promise. I can't come see you anymore. The next moment, the cane that had been striking the ground was forcefully thrown at Swaine. It's all your fault. Grandfather pointed his finger at Swaine, cursing angrily. I just found out that you've been hanging around with that Danny girl recently. Ethel was so heartbroken, yet she still covered for you in front of me. He trembled as he approached Swaine Patel, forcefully kicking him to the ground. How can you face Ethel? Have you forgotten? She's not just your wife, she's also your savior who rescued you. These few sentences left the septuagenarian almost breathless. The experts present hurriedly began emergency treatment for grandfather. Swaine, prostrate on the ground, stared at me on the hospital bed with a fierce gaze, tears streaming down his face. I thought you would never leave me. Ethel, I was wrong, I regret it. Please wake up and talk to me, okay? The silent ICU was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. The only response was the echo of his heart-wrenching cries. Swaine Patel's perspective. My phone was easily unlocked by Swaine. The password was the date of our wedding. His hand trembled as he turned on the phone. The first screen that appeared was the private message interface of my social media account. With just one glance, Swaine seemed to be electrified, unable to move, his eyes full of shock. He slowly scrolled through the screen. Danny's taunts and insults towards me over the past few months unfolded before him word for word. In that moment, Swaine's world seemed to completely collapse. He watched as the indulgence and tolerance he had once shown to Danny turned into countless venomous snakes, biting his wife. The phone vibrated, and Swaine Patel switched to the message interface. It was a message from my private doctor. Miss Shaw, why haven't you come for a follow-up recently? He scrolled up. He quickly saw the diagnosis of my severe depression. Diagnostic guidance, very low mood, lifeless, frequent feelings of helplessness and despair. Thoughts of seeking relief through ending life, obvious sleep disturbances. Swaine looked at the diagnosis date and felt it was familiar. Suddenly he remembered that was the day Danny joined Patel Company and became his secretary. The doctor asked, "Why do you feel this way?" Ethel answered, "My husband's first love has come back. He often abandons me for her and argues with me. He wasn't like this before." After a few minutes, Ethel replied again, "I feel like he doesn't love me anymore." Swaine slowly closed his eyes. Tears rolled down, soaking his collar. His mouth opened and closed, the words he was about to say seemed particularly difficult. Bitterness spreading in his mouth. After a while, it gradually became clear. Ethel. Ethel, I'm sorry. I do love you. I'm sorry for making you endure so much grievance. 2 lines of tears also welled up from my eyes. My soul gradually faded. I looked at the system, confirming in his eyes that this was my last moment in this world. Unexpectedly, I was surprised to find that Swaine Patel's gaze met mine. Ethel. He frantically reached out into the air, trying to hold me back from leaving. I smiled bitterly. Swaine Patel, I have no last words for you, nor do I accept your apology. As the words fell, my soul completely dissipated in Swaine's shattered gaze. When I woke up again, I was in a hospital bed. The orphanage director, my mother figure, wept with joy. Ethel, you're awake. She didn't have time to talk to me, hurrying to call the doctor. It was then that I remembered, in my original world, I had died saving someone. My soul entered the Transmigration Management Bureau. The director told me that everyone who died saving others had one chance to be reborn. As long as they completed the task they carried when transmigrating into a book, they could be reborn in their original world. In the real world, people often called this a medical miracle. My transmigration task was to conquer the Yandra male supporting character, Swaine Patel. After I recovered and left the hospital, I returned to the orphanage and continued to be the deputy director. I was thrown here after birth and after growing up. I stayed here to accompany more children as they grew. In the evening, after all the children were asleep, I made a pot of tea and had a final casual chat with the system in the courtyard. Host, Danny is already dead. Ah. I was a bit surprised. Why? Those robbers already had blood on their hands. The system made a small plan, making them mention Danny's name when they were caught by old Mr. Patel. I raised my thumb in admiration. But the system felt it wasn't thorough enough. She died even more tragically than you. You know, old Mr. Patel used to be in the underworld. He liked you so much, so he personally took action. He didn't finish, just made a throat-slitting gesture. But I could imagine how cruel old Mr. Patel's methods were. And Swaine Patel, after you left, he was also beaten half to death by old Mr. Patel. He became self-destructive, getting dead drunk at your grave every day. It won't be long before he dies of alcohol poisoning. I clicked my tongue in amazement. What a pity about the Patel family fortune, no one to inherit it. The system smiled slyly. A stack of bank cards appeared in front of me. After Swaine Patel dies, the Patel family fortune will be transferred into these cards by the Transmigration Management Bureau. Host, are you ready to become a super ultra rich lady? In the quiet summer night, my exclamation rang out. I'm ready.